want to start by thanking Fred and Ron both for giving up some of their Tuesday afternoon to help me with the mechanics of getting on Zoom and getting the presentation up and running. I think this is only my second Zoom presentation, so when you don't do something every day, it helps to have a little refresher course. So thank you guys for that. And you know, I appreciate the very kind comments from Mark and some of the others. But I got to tell you, the presentation, just a footnote, I was telling Fred and Ron this on Tuesday, you know, for the last 7 months during all these COVID restrictions, like many of you, I've been at home and been sort of inundated with train videos, clinics. Hell, the NMRA gave their national convention on virtual Zoom. So, you know, I've seen program after program after program. And one of the things I noticed, and one of the reasons I decided to do this particular clinic, put this together, is many of the, if you do on a scale of 1 to 10, where 1 is maybe somebody just getting into the hobby, and 10 is somebody who's already earned their MMR and maybe all of the certificates of the Master Model Railroader. So on a scale of 1 to 10, it seems like the majority of the presentations I witnessed have been 8, 9s, or 10s. And, you know, and that is great. I mean, those guys are fantastic. They give great programs. They're doing this, they're doing that. It's all wonderful. But what about the people who are 7 and below? I mean, who maybe don't have those kind of skill levels, or maybe don't aspire to that level of modeling, but they still enjoy the hobby. They still enjoy getting into trains and the social aspect of it and everything that goes with being a model railroader. So, and I told Fred and Ron, I'm going to come here today to lower the bar. Everybody wants to raise the bar, and that's great. Everybody should strive to be better than what they are. But sometimes you'll lose people. If you're way up here in the clouds and I'm just starting out and I see something that I think to myself, I'm going to have to do that to be a part of this hobby, I may have quickly lost interest as a newbie. And I may be a fly fisherman today instead of a model railroader. So I decided to put together a clinic where I've truly lowered the bar, so that somebody who is maybe just getting started, or even somebody who has been in the hobby for a while but has built a layout but has a lot of what I call, in my shameless promotion that I sent out earlier in the week, the so-called plywood prairie. And for a lot of years, you know, my layout is 30 plus years old, and it's nowhere near complete, and it may never be complete in my lifetime, and that's okay. But I have a lot of fun with it. So bear with me. This clinic is a premiere. I've not given it before. So hopefully there's something in it for everybody. And without further ado, I'll go ahead and start it. All right. So what I'm going to talk about today is how I added a scene to a 3 square foot area on my layout in 15 easy steps. You know, easy is a relative term, right? What's easy for me may be difficult for somebody else, and vice versa. So what I mean to say is, trust me, guys, if I can do this, then anyone can do it. So first step, identify the area for your scene, right? It seems logical, but you got to put it somewhere. And the key here is keep it manageable, right? If I pick a section that's, you know, 4 by 8 and try to take that all in at once, that, for me, that quickly becomes overwhelming. It's like, no, I'll tackle that later. So I selected an area. This is an area on my layout that you can see it's essentially, it's a homosoap prairie, not a plywood prairie, but it's been vacant like that for, God, I put this little peninsula on here probably 20 years ago, and it's very small. It's only 36 inches by 10 inches. So it's 3 times long as it is wide. So, but it's a very manageable area, about 3 square foot. Very easy step, identify the area. Second step, okay, what type of scene am I going to put there? What would be appropriate for that area? So the way I want to do that is I'm going to assess the joining scenes to see what makes sense, right? I mean, I'm not going to put a cornfield in the middle of a downtown urban area, and likewise, I'm not going to put a skyscraper in the middle of a cornfield. So what makes sense? So I look to one side of the scene, and I've got this little basic steel company, okay? I look to the other side, and I've got Valley Cement Company. I look behind the scene, and I've got some warehouse buildings that are actually part of the Valley Cement Company. So to me, putting another industry there would be appropriate for that space, wouldn't look out of place. So now the question becomes, okay, what type of industry do I put there? Well, since the space I'm trying to fill is narrow, long and narrow, right? 3 times long compared to its width. And because like many model railroaders, I have many unbuilt kits, right? That you buy these kits with the intention of building them, you put them under your workbench, and the next thing you know, you got a half a dozen unbuilt kits. I looked through those and hey, I had a very specific industry. I already have the kit, so why not build it? And that particular kit was going to be a propane distributorship. So I'm going to build something that looks like this, all right? And Walther's Cornerstone series makes the perfect kit. This central gas and supply has been around. Hell, I've had it under my workbench probably for 15 years, if not longer. It's probably been out 20, 25 years. And the kit has all the ingredients for a nice little scene. It's got an office building. It has a little pump house, a couple of large storage tanks, a distribution shed, a few minor accessories that are part of the kit, and of course the track, a service track, not part of the kit, but it makes it a railroad scene by having a service track. So I thought this would be a great little kit. All right, so I've done the first 2 steps, very easy. Anybody can do it. You don't have to be an MMR to do that. So now I'm going to decide the location of the track, right? I've got to lay it out, where I'm going to put the structures and any other scenic features. So there's my blank canvas, if you will. So the storage tanks, the pump house, and the distribution shed, they have to be co-located because there's piping. They're all piped together in this kit. So they kind of, once I determine where I'm going to put the tanks, the pump house and distribution shed, it's kind of predetermined for me. The office, I thought, well, I'm just going to put it over here a little bit away, close enough, but somewhat away from the tanks there. I'm going to make, it's not part of the kit, but I'm going to put a company sign that I'm going to make. I'll show you how I did that a little bit later. The service track I have, now this is going to be a static display, right? Because my layout has been built many, many years ago. So I'm not going to tie this into anything. This is just going to be a static piece of track. I can put cars on it for scenic effect, but it's not going to figure into my operating sessions. And that's perfectly all right, right? Because I'm making a scene here, not something that necessarily has to operate. So I'm going to put the track here. I've got to have an access road to the office. So I'm going to make a little access road that'll cross the tracks over there. I'm going to have some service areas and some parking, right, for the office. And the rest of this will probably be some kind of grassy area. Maybe I'll put in a tree or 2 and see what that's going to look like. So the 4th step, well, I better assemble and paint the structures, right? And again, these Cornerstone kits, they're very simple structures. I'm not scratch building anything here. All you need is a few simple tools, some glue, a few inexpensive clamps, and you can build these structures. So anybody can do this type of work. And then I have a lot of cans of spray paint around. Oh, and by the way, let me just a footnote here. To do this project, I had to purchase one thing. Everything else I had in my supply of railroading stuff. Now, I've been in the hobby a long time, so you accumulate things, but the paints and the glues and the scenic materials and all the things that you'll see me use later, I only had to buy one thing. So all this stuff was just lying around. Anyway, when I spray paint, I always do that. I do not have a spray paint booth. You don't need one. Go outside on a sunny day like today. You can see I'm on my wood pile back behind my garage. You just set out some paper and I just spray it. And if you're doing something like this, because I know I'm going to come back and glue in the windows and doors, I mask off the gluing surfaces so that the plastic cement, the liquid cement can react with the styrene and doesn't have to worry about the paint there. So. And then I also used my garage. I think it was raining that day, so I just went in my garage. I suspended the tanks up here. Even though they're molded in the white paint, I like to spray paint them white because there's something about the molded that just looks molded to me. When you paint it, I think it makes it enhances the appearance a little bit. So and again, always paint in a well-vented area. It was raining outside. I did open my garage door, and that's about as vented as I can get working in my garage. Now, some of the items I just left on the sprue and painted them. And I love the fact that this little pump house was molded in white because I didn't have to do any mortar lines. All I did was use this little acrylic paint. I use these little tube paints. I'm sure you guys are familiar with those. You can pick those up at any craft store or Hobby Lobby or wherever. They're maybe $1.50 a bottle or something like that. And there you can dilute them. You can wash them off if you make a mistake. I mean, it's incredible. So I dry brush the bricks, and because it's molded in white, you get the nice mortar lines automatically. All right, once I've assembled and painted the structures, now I'm going to apply some decals and I'm going to add some signage to the buildings. So the decals supplied with the sheet are nice. You could have 1 or 2 different names for your selected commercial propane just because. And so I applied those, and I'm going to create additional signage by using the help of my computer. This is the only sophisticated tool I have in this whole process is my computer. I use the Microsoft PowerPoint, and you could use Word or whatever if you have an Apple product, Apple Sheets or whatever they call the different software. But it's very easy. I go in there and using the toolbar, I create my signs using the text box feature. And I'm going to have one for the office building, just commercial propane. And then the larger sign I'm going to print out and put out into the plant into the ground near the storage tanks is the big commercial propane company distributor of home heating provider. And of course, you can go online and you can pull down smoking icons. I'm going to add some no smoking signs, right? Because it's propane, so I don't want people to smoke around the building. So I just pulled that icon from the internet and put it in here, sized it right? It's very easy to size this stuff. Print it out. You can see I just printed it out. You cut it. I didn't know how big the no smoking sign, so I just made them a couple different sizes, printed it out. I always leave a small border so that when I'm handling it, I can handle it by the border and don't get my finger oils and everything onto the sign itself. I use just full strength white glue. I applied with one of these inexpensive brushes, just paint it right on. Because it's the large sign, I'm using 40,000 sheet styrene. I just glue the sign just right on top of it. You can see the piece of styrene there. I do a little light sanding to the styrene just to give it a little bit of tooth so that the glue adheres a little bit better. And again, I've done this over the years and I've never had any of these come loose. And even if they do come loose, so what? You get your white glue out, just spread a little bit on it and put it right back on. So it's no problem. And then I'm going to cut out the exact dimensions of the sign. And please use a sharp blade to do this. I got lazy, didn't change my blade, and what happened, I tore my sign. So I had to go back up to the computer, just printed it out again, cut it out again, glued it on a different section of the styrene, and then got a sharp knife and cut it out and didn't have any problem. To support the sign, I just went up to the kitchen, got a few of these little bamboo kebab skewers, and with my little chopper tool, I just cut 3 pieces. I made one of them longer, the center one, so I can plant it. Paint the back of the sign black, and I just used some super glue on the supports, and there's my completed sign. I made the commercial propane because it's a smaller sign and I'm gluing it on the building. I mounted it on 20 thousandths styrene. Didn't need to be any thicker than that. In fact, if it's much thicker, it would look like it's protruding too far out. Okay, step number 6. We're almost halfway there, a little more than a third of the way there. Add piping, assemble and paint the accessories. And again, I do much of this at the workbench because the piping is a little fragile, and I just follow the kit instructions, and they're not even verbal instructions. They're just blow-ups, and you can just look at it and see how things go together. And of course, the final piping will need to occur once I put the structures in place on the layout and just tie the pump house and the distribution shed to the storage tanks. A couple of just inexpensive, cheap looking accessories that I just painted them up and glued them together, and I'll use them in the seam a little bit later. So now I want to paint the track side rails to eliminate that big sheen that you always get, right? Too shiny. That's the desired effect, something like this. Now, if you notice, these ties are brown, as is the sides of the rail. Well, I told you I didn't go out and buy anything for this project. All I had was black Rust-Oleum paint primer, okay? So, so there's the piece of Atlas Flex Track that I had left over long before they came out with the Code 83 stuff. But I had this, why not use it? It's black. I have black spray paint. So, you know, can railroad ties be black? Yes, I think they can. At least at one time they're black, right? So I took it in my backyard. Why? Because I want to spray paint in a well-ventilated area. And I have a black 4-rail fence in my backyard. So I just put the thing right across the top rail and just blasted it with the spray paint can. No problem at all. And yeah, the fence was already black. This is not overspray from my job. To get the paint off the rails, this is going to be a static display, so I'm not concerned about scratching the rails or anything because it's never going to conduct any electricity. So I can use a bright boy. And typically what I do is after I spray paint track, I'll take a rag and just wipe the rails while the paint is still wet, and then go back over it with some kind of abrasive tool to kind of just, clean it off really well. But in this case, it didn't matter since this track will never see any power. All right, step 8. Now it's time to install and ballast the track. There's my space. I've determined that the track was going to be along the front edge about 1.5 inches. And then it's just going to kind of curve slightly to the table's edge, right? It's not going to tie anything. Again, it's a static display. It's very old school. I like straight lines, so I make sure I have a straight edge. I measured in 1.5 inches. I drew a track center line, right? This is just textbook stuff. Nothing difficult about this at all. And I still use, the old rail tacks and just nail it right down into the Homa soap. You can see where I curved it to go off to the end of the track. Made a dotted line there, and I'm going to go through and cut it with a Dremel tool with a cutoff blade. That took every bit of a few seconds to do that. And then I want to file the ends of the rail smooth, because otherwise it'll might catch your clothing, or it'll cut your finger or something like that. So I just like anything that's close to the edge like that, I want it to be smooth, so any roaming hands or knuckles or clothes won't catch on that rail. So now the track is ready to be ballasted. So before I get into that, I just want to talk a little bit about the wetting and sealing agents that I use for ballasting. So my wetting agent is a mixture of water and isopropyl alcohol, about 80% water to 20% alcohol. Why the alcohol? Because that reduces the surface tension of the water. Some people use little drops of dishwasher liquid. Every time I do that, I'm spraying out bubbles. So I just got away from that years ago. I read an article where somebody said, hey, use alcohol. And I think in the article, they use 50% water, 50% alcohol. Then it smells like a hospital operating room when you do that. So I just 80-20 roughly works for me. The sealing agent, I use diluted white glue, about 4 parts water to 1 part glue. So 20% glue to 40% to 80% water, plus some isopropyl alcohol, again, to reduce the surface tension. And the important thing about both of these statements here is that these mixture proportions are not exact. They may need to be adjusted for your particular application or whatever. Some people like their sealing agent glue to be more or less viscous. They'll want it thicker or not so runny. So these are guidelines, right? I really don't even measure this stuff. I just pour it in there and shake it up. Is it too low of viscosity? If so, I'll add more glue, and vice versa. So just bear that in mind. And for misting agent, I like to use the water bottle, because spray, I like to spray it from above and let it kind of settle down. That way it doesn't blow away all the stuff that you might have already put out there, all the ballast or scenery, whatever. For my applicator, I don't spray it. I like just a little bottle where I can control it a little bit better. And and plus I found using the spray bottle, anytime I have glue, even though I try to clean them out, it seems like they always clog. The next time I use it, they're clogged up. I have to throw it away. You know, the glue dries in them, makes the channels smaller and whatever. So I just use something like this. And then of course, that's just store-bought alcohol. You can see I bought it at Kroger, probably 99 cents a bottle or something like that. I just use that. All right, so, you know, my daughter, next Saturday, a week from today, she turns 34. That is a container of sand that I bought when I had a sandbox for her when she turned 3. So some things don't have a shelf life, and sand is one of those. So I saved it, and now I use it for ballast material. Nothing to this, pour it out on the track, use a brush, something to kind of knock it off of the rails, knock it off of the ties. There's my wetting agent. I'm careful before I missed anything. I want to cover any surrounding track or scenery that I might have, because it can get messy. It can get wet for sure. And when I took this photograph, I noticed, oh, look, that's some shiny material. That's because I forgot to paint the rail joiners when I added some more track to get the length I needed. I forgot to paint those black. So I'll go back and touch that up later. So you can see how they kind of stand out there. So after the ballast is down, I've wetted it, and then I just go through with my sealing agent, and, you know, by wicking action, I just go down the center of the rails and then on each side of it, and you can watch it just wick in, and it goes in, you know, pretty quick. And again, because I have some isopropyl alcohol in there, it reduces the surface tension, and the fact that the ballast is already wet kind of reduces the tension as well. All right, now I want to add scenery along the sides of the track, and I'm just going to do it along the sides of the track because, again, it is just a small area. I'm not going to conquer the whole area all at once. I'm just going to concentrate around the sides of the track just to kind of get that looking the way I want it. So some notes about my scenery materials. I use a variety of ground foam cover material, you know, Woodland Scenics turf. And I go back a long time ago. Who remembers the dyed sawdust? I still have some of that lying around, and just miscellaneous other things. I used the clump foliage and various field grasses to provide a three-dimensional appearance, right, to get away from the flatness. Static grass is great. I just saw a clinic. One of the guys in the club gave one a week or so ago. It's great, but I'm not there yet. I don't have an applicator. I've not tried that. I just, you know, I'm not there. So I eat a lot of peanut butter, as you can tell, so I keep all my scenery materials in cleaned out peanut butter bottles. And you can see when you've been around a long time, you collect a lot of stuff: some sawdust, Woodland Scenics turf, clump foliage, miscellaneous ground cover, just strange. Woodland Scenics makes field grasses. I buy this stuff in different colors, and you can use that to create a little taller scenery surroundings. And so I follow the same 3 steps as with ballasting. For the ground cover, I apply the ground cover materials, and you can use a sifter. I just grab a pinch of it, and I just apply it with my fingers. But you can use a little sifter or however you use. There's no right or wrong answer for this. Once I apply it, I mist everything with a wetting agent, and I let it rain down on it. I don't spray it forcibly at it. That's why I cover everything around it, because I'm almost spraying it up in the air so that it settles down, because it's not glued down at this time. And if you spray at it, it'll blow it all off the table. But once it's wet, it kind of stays in place. And then I apply the sealing agent. And so there you have it. So spur tracks may have some vegetation growing between the rails. So I just add a little bit, just a light touch of some ground cover, just to show that how sometimes tracks will have vegetation between the rails. You can get as carried away depending on how heavily used you expect your spur to be. If it's not heavily used, you'd obviously have more stuff growing in it probably, if it's not heavily maintained, versus if it was used on a regular basis. I go through and I add clump foliage and field grasses to provide relief from the flatness of the scene, right? To give it just a little bit of the three-dimensional quality. So the 10th step, I need to add an access road to the facility. So I was down in Smith Grove, Kentucky, rendezvousing, picking up my grandchild, she who lives in Nashville. Anyway, we met at Smith Grove, and I happened to notice this asphalt crossing, and that was, you know, very smooth, very neat, and I kind of like that. So that's what I'm going to put in. And to do that, I had some drywall compound that I helped my father-in-law put up some drywall about, I don't know, 4 or 5 months earlier. And so this stuff was still good. And if you've never used it, it does a pretty good job of making asphalt roads. And I simply have a little palette knife, but you can use a putty knife or any similar flat, smooth tool to apply this stuff. I just applied it right out of the tub. You know, this is pre-mixed stuff. And you don't mix it. Open the top, dip in your palette knife, and just apply it. And if you want, you can make little forms for it. I didn't do that. I mean, this is such a small area. I just did it, and then I'll let it set up. And once it sets up, before it gets too set up, I'll go back with a small jeweler's screwdriver to cut flangeways into the compound. And then what I really love about this stuff is when it's dry, you know, it'll be rough. You can take a wet sponge and smooth it out in a couple of swipes, and it'll be as smooth as a baby's backside. So it's, you know, no fuss, no mess. I mean, it's incredible. So anyway, that's how I put in my little access road. We'll get back to that later. So now I need to create and install a parking and service area. What am I going to use? Just cardstock. I mean, good Lord, I had this stuff, you know, just save greeting cards and you have plenty of cardstock, right? This stuff is just lying around. That's from my stash. I took a little X-Acto knife, and using the back side of it, I just etched some expansion joints, concrete expansion joints. Again, not difficult, easy to do. I measured them off to look like, visually to me, would be how in a big parking area, how far apart they would be. I don't, you know, modeling, I don't know what they would actually be. Does it look all right? Yeah, it looks fine to me. To apply those, I use full strength white glue. I have these little cheap disposable brushes, and I will just paint the area that I'm going to, where I'm going to apply them. And then I'll apply them. And because it's cardstock and the white glue is water-based, these things will want to curl up on you, right? So you better weight them down to make sure that they adhere. Otherwise, you'll come back and the ends will all be, you know, might not look that way at first, but as the water penetrates the cardstock, it'll start to deform on you. So I use weights. And because this cardstock was pretty thick, those weights weren't heavy enough. So I had to really get serious and add a little bit more weight. And that's fine. And I'm careful to cover the whole thing because they'll coil up at the corners just the slightest amount. So now I want to paint and weather the parking area and service area and the access road. So again, a little tube paint that I had in my stash of paints. I actually painted it too dark. I didn't realize it until I got about this far, and I said, that's too dark. That's okay. I had a lighter gray, so then I used that. And once I got it all painted, I used an alcohol India ink mixture to weather it. You got to be careful here. I've done others where I've gotten away from the alcohol because the alcohol, you know, you can use that as a paint remover on, you know, like, you know, to rub off lettering on a car and things like that. So when you use an alcohol Indian ink mixture over paint, what does it do? It kind of wants to remove the paint. It worked out for me in this area because it really kind of made the concrete look like some of it had stripped away and there's wider sections below it. So it was one of those happy accidents, I guess you could say. But for future projects, I will use diluted acrylic black paint if I want to get a black wash. I'll probably stay away from the alcohol, just an author's note. And for some reason, and maybe because it was the alcohol, it it obscured my expansion joints. So I kind of had to re-scribe those. I just used a small putty knife as a straight edge and just scribed them. I could still see where the joints were. They just weren't they didn't stand out very well. So I redid it, and that's the finished parking lot. And you can see sections here where it kind of just, see the darker paint underneath because it took away the lighter paint, you know. Anyway. So next thing I'm going to do is paint the access road. So I went ahead and painted it. And one of the nice things about using the drywall compound is if you apply it, and if it's too thick in some layers, when it dries out, again, water-based, it'll crack. Well, you know, I wanted cracks in the asphalt because asphalt cracks. So they worked in my favor. You know, again, another happy accident. So, so I painted it black. I just took a little, looked like black tar marks with a brush and painted over the cracks. And then I used some light gray to show a little bit of wear on the asphalt. And once again, that's the road I was trying to model. And that's what mine looks like. Step 13, so we're winding down. So finish applying the scenery, the trees, the grasses, etc. And be sure when you do this, you're going to match the trackside scenery, right? So it's, you know, you got to keep that in mind. So all I did is use various things. I grab it in my fingertips and I just spread it out until I cover a whole area. And these are, you know, again, this is, you know, a small area that you work in. Otherwise, if it's a large area, I might have a shaker tool or something where I could apply it fairly quickly. Again, I cover everything, and then I mist it with the wetting agent. And then I liberally apply the sealing agent to the entire area, and you can watch it kind of soak in. And when you do that on a large scale, sometimes you're going to develop bare spots like that. That's not a problem. Just go ahead and grab some more scenic material and fill them in while the area is still wet. And that's kind of, and it hadn't fully dried. It still looks, it's still wet when I took this picture. And I had an idea where my structures were going to go. And because the sun won't get to the underside of them, that area is not going to be as green. It's going to be darker. So I kind of made sure to do that. I'm going to plant some trees. Now, this is the only thing I ended up buying. So I'd used these years ago in the past, and this was a very inexpensive alternative, and I only wanted 3 trees. So I said, I'm going to buy a little package of these. You know, they're readily available at the hobby shop, online, wherever you get your supplies, and they're at a nominal cost. They're very easy to bend, and I just take full strength white glue, apply it to the branches, and then apply my clump foliage. Now, the clump foliage, if you can see it in the background there, I use 2 different shades because if you look at a tree out in nature, it's rarely one uniform color, right? I mean, it's got variations. Typically, the underside of the leaves are darker because they're not getting, the sun is not hitting them. They're shadows, right? So I just use 2 different shades so it looks, so the eye says, oh yeah, there's some shadow here, you know, automatically, without having to get, you know, spray paint the underside and all that kind of stuff, which some people do. And then the trunks of these are nice. They've got the relief already molded into the bark already molded into the trunk. So what I'm going to do is dry brush. And, you know, the tendency, I think a lot of people is, well, I'm going to dry brush brown because wood is brown, tree trunks are brown. Go out and look at a tree trunk in your yard. It's not brown, it's gray. So I use a light gray, again, to dry brush the trunk to bring out the highlights. And there is my finished tree. And, you know, to me, it looks like a tree, and that's all I was after. And these are great because they have the little peg already. You just drill a small hole, put some white glue in there, and you plant them. And I read somewhere where, from an aesthetic standpoint, you always plant trees in odd numbers. So that's why I planted 3. 1 wasn't enough. 2 would have given me an odd number. It wouldn't be pleasing to the eye, according to the experts. So 3 was the perfect number, and I just planted them in my scene. All right, second to last step, place completed structures and piping into the scene. And so I'm just going to add the office building here. I'll put my tanks in place, connect all, you can see all the piping that connects it all. And the final, 15th and final step, add details and accessories to complement and accent the scene. And you can be as liberal as you want on this. You can add 2 items, you can have 20 items, whatever you have. So I added a little truck here carrying some of the smaller propane tanks. I added my no smoking signs. I added some tire bumpers for the automobiles that are going to be parked there. I added a few automobiles. I'm planting my sign now, right? That's an accessory, if you will. That's what it looks like. I added some, it's the end of the track, right? So I didn't want the cars to roll off and foul the next track behind it. So I added these wheel bumpers to the ends of the rails, and I picked those up at, they're little white metal castings. I think I paid like $2.50 for them up at Skill Reproductions, about a month or so ago. And when I took this picture and I looked and I said, oh my God, I forgot to apply scenery materials to these areas. So I went back and I did that. And of course, to bring life to any scene, you got to have people, right? People are alive. So I just added a few. And now they're open for business. They've got their first cut of cars. So let's just compare for a moment. That's where I started. And by the way, that's the completed scene. It took me longer to put together this PowerPoint presentation than it did to go from the picture on the upper left to the one on the lower right. So it's not that difficult to do. The end. Well, wait a minute. Not quite the end. There's one thing. So now that I've got that completed scene, I look around and behind it, there's no scenery there. And the scene next to it, there's no scenery there. So, scenery can be a little bit contagious. So be careful, because once you start something, even though it's a small project and you finish it, you say, man, now everything else looks really bad that's right next to it. So, so it's a vicious cycle. So there's how it looks now. Remember that scene behind it? Nothing there. Now there's something there. And Valley Cement, just a bunch of cars. We operated this for years. I mean, it operates just fine. The track is there, the structures are there, the cars are delivered and dropped off, but there was never any scenery there. So now there's a little bit of scenery. So it gets a little bit contagious. Gentlemen, that's my presentation for the day. I thank you for attending. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something. And if there are any questions, I will be more than happy to answer them.
Thanks very much, Bob. Great presentation.